Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
How does it feel to be restored back to health? Hi, I'm Jen. This is the Bible for Busy People podcast. And when COVID happened, our family managed to dodge it for 2 whole years as we spent time at home and turned to Zoom for social events and took the precautions that we could in public. Around the second year, we were starting to resume normal activities, and we went to a church family summer camp, who also, by the way, advised precautions and encouraged people to stay home if they were sick. Unfortunately, COVID found its way to camp. I could tell based on one kid's coughing that was how it was going to go. Sure enough, a few days later, we all came down with sore throats, headaches, and sore bodies. And in addition, I could barely smell or taste anything. To my surprise, even when the other symptoms went away, the lack of smell and most tastes lasted for, I kid you not, about 6 weeks. It was so disorienting and discouraging. I remember exactly where I was and what I was eating when my taste buds finally came back in full force. I could taste ripe tomatoes bursting in my mouth, and they were the best things I'd tasted in a very long time. We're back in Elijah's story today talking about restoration. At this point in the story, the drought had been going on for 3 years. King Ahab was still refusing to turn to God, and he wasn't hearing from his idols, but he persisted in trying to seek out any grass for their animals. And that's when his administrator, Obadiah, ran into Elijah. Obadiah had been faithful, having hidden and fed 100 of God's prophets, but you get a sense for how wicked his boss was. Elijah had to confirm with poor Obadiah that he would actually follow through and show up before Ahab. And that's where our story picks up in 1 Kings 18 in verse 16. It says, "So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, 'Is that you, you troubler of Israel?' 'I have not made trouble for Israel,' Elijah replied, 'but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table.' So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, 'How long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him.' But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, 'I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God.' Then all the people said, 'What you say is good.'" So that's what they did. Elijah has the prophets of Baal do all of that first. And it says, "Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. 'Baal, answer us,' they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. 'Shout louder,' he said. 'Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened.' So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice, but there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, 'Come here to me.' They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, 'Your name shall be Israel.' With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, 'Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood.' And he has them do it 3 times. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, 'Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again.' Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench." We'll stop there for now. Ahab called Elijah a troubler of Israel, and it may well have been that he was so caught up in a lie that he believed good was bad and bad was good. But as the Enduring Word commentary points out, Elijah had humiliated him and exposed his false religion. Ahab hated him. But Elijah did not back down from the truth. Even when our sin can muddy the waters of what is good and bad, the truth always comes out. In the Bible, God is consistent in this, calling us back to repentance and reconciliation and relationship. How good is God to not give up on us? Elijah not only called out Ahab, but all the people of Israel. How long will you waver between two opinions? The Hebrew word there means dance. How long will you dance between two opinions? Elijah was calling out the foolishness of going back and forth. And Charles Spurgeon expanded on this thought, saying, how many more sermons do you want? How many more Sundays must roll away wasted? How many warnings? How many sicknesses? How many tollings of the bells to warn you that you must die? How many graves must be dug for your family before you will be impressed? How many plagues and pestilences must ravage the city before you will turn to God in truth? How long halt ye between two opinions? The people didn't have any answer for him. Much like the false gods they've been worshiping, they're silent. So Elijah set up an epic challenge. The prophets of Baal performed wildly before the altar. They were dancing, yelling, even slashing themselves until they drew blood for hours. It was so ridiculous that Elijah started making fun of them. Elijah then raised the stakes by responding without panic or frenzy. Instead, he gently called the people over, repaired God's altar, and then called for precious water in the middle of a drought to be poured over the altar until the trench around it was full. Elijah, full of the Spirit, was calling God's people back to a right way of worship, acknowledging in prayer the time of the evening sacrifice, restoring the altar, and honoring the tribes of Judah and God's promise. The Spirit brings order to chaos. We've talked about that before on the podcast. The Spirit, as we talked about last week, shows up symbolically in water, on the altar, and in fire, which came next. Elijah prayed with confidence and steadiness, and he says, you are turning their hearts back again. If anything sums up the Bible, I think this might be it. God is turning our hearts back again. God is restoring us to who we were meant to be in peaceful, trusting relationship with God, back to wholeness and well-being. God responded beyond expectations, sending fire from the sky to burn up the whole altar and all the water around it, and it led to a strong response from his people, which you can go back and read. It's God's heart to bring us back into truth, rest, and relationship and well-being. Those who worship the false god went into a frenzy with no answer. I don't think God ever had that intention for our worship or relationship. God also restores order to chaos and restores us to wholeness. In what ways, dramatic or everyday, have you seen God work to wake you up and turn your heart back? I think about things as big as heartbreaking health challenges to simple walks in nature. How about you? I'll leave you with that. Let's talk again tomorrow. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to assume two things about you. First of all, that you're a busy person, and second, that you are in need of a restful break. Cannon Beach Conference Center is the place for a beautiful coastal retreat, whether it's one of their enriching conferences or your own church or ministry event. You can find out more at 800-745-1546 or visit cbcc.net. Thank you to Cannon Beach Conference Center for sponsoring the Bible for Busy People.
Thank you for listening to The Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or want to go deeper in your faith, visit our show notes. Will you take a moment to share with a friend and leave a review? It helps the Bible get into even more people's minds and hearts. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at purposely.com.